In fact, let me use another story to illustrate.
Please, I love stories.
This is a story not from me, but from a television show. So many people remember the television show MASH.
Yes.
Remember the show MASH?
With Radar and
yeah. So we're aging ourselves that we remember it. Some people.
Okay.
But there's a character on the show the show takes place in Korea during the Korean War, and there's a bunch of doctors who are assigned to be there for the war, and they're doctors. They're not military people, so they're kind of a fish out of water.
Right.
And the show talks about how sad it is that war occurs, and it's there's messages being offered, and there are values that are trying to be perpetuated, and it was well written, and there was some funny moments. And a character in the show at one point is Major Charles Emerson Winchester. Right? This man, the character, is a superb physician, a bit of a jerk, self-impressed, arrogant.
The British accent?
With a bit of a British, he's from Boston, and he has a Boston accent. Right,
okay.
Right. But the character, we're supposed to believe, is a really talented surgeon and is really impressed with himself and wants others to be impressed. But we know he also likes the finer things in life.
Yes.
And we have a sense as the audience that he's a redeemable character. We kind of like him, even though we recognize he's a bit of a jerk. And there's an episode where a soldier is injured and comes to the MASH unit where he's the doctor. And he's had terrible damage to his leg. And normally that leg would just be amputated. But Charles, because he's such a talented surgeon, manages to repair the vascular damage and put together the bones. And although it takes a bit of time, he saves the man's leg. And this is obviously a big quality of life thing. If you lose one leg, you're not going to be able to get around quite so easily. It's psychologically upsetting.
It's huge.
So he's very impressed with himself, Charles is, that he saved the leg. The soldier also had damage in one arm, some ligament damage in one hand, not as big a deal, so he's not as worried about that. And he handles that too. So now the man is recovering. It's the next day. He's recovering from the anesthesia, and Charles, very impressed with himself, comes by to do his rounds and see the patient now that he's awake. And with a bit of wry humor, talks about how you caught me on a good day. I was able to repair your leg. And he was expecting the patient to be very pleased and proud of what had happened. And he was appreciative. But at the same time, he notices, the patient does, that his arm is bandaged. What happened here? Charles says, well, there's been some damage there. It was really quite minor, but I don't think that's going to be a big issue. He said there's some ligament damage, and there'll be a certain loss of dexterity, but you'll still be able to use the hand quite well.
I remember. Is he a violin player?
No, piano.
He was a piano player.
Yeah. And the man becomes devastated.
Devastated.
Right? Because he's a concert pianist.
Yes.
And this speaks to Charles. Because Charles loves music and these fine things. And he doesn't, and he suddenly, his heart sinks.
I'm remembering
because he wants this guy to realize that his life is not over. The guy feels like his life is
over. He gets
right?
And he teaches them
he says to him,
music
he
of the
says
one
to
hand.
him, right? He says to him, there are all kinds of. He finds that's right. There's a kind of music that was written, piano music that was written by a man who lost his arm in World War I.
A one-handed composer player,
right? And he gets those for the patient. And the patient says, "What? I'm going to do a bunch of freak pieces?" And he says, "No, you don't get it. This is the key part of the scene." Okay. He says, "You don't get it," Charles says. The point is not that you can play these freak pieces. The point is that you have a gift that I don't have. He says, you can teach. You can use the baton. You can use the pen.
Right.
But you have he says, I have hands, Charles says. I have hands that can make a scalpel sing. But I don't have the gift. More than anything else in my life, I've wanted to be able to play the piano. But I can't make the music. I can play the notes, but I can't make the music. And that really captures this important point I'm trying to make. Charles will never have the expertise the gift, in this case, of being able to play the music. He can do the transactional part. He can do the mechanics. He can push his finger on the piano, push the key down so it makes a C. But he can't make the music. So ideally, if a physician is any good at what he or she does, they can play the music. They're there not to give that transaction. They're there not just to play the notes. They're there to put it together and help the listener, patient, understand what all this stuff means.